Thank you to Lorna, to Steve and to Aisha for that stimulating session. The debate will no doubt go on. And now, in our penultimate session of the day, we have Chris Pitt, former head of marketing at HSBC UK and now CEO Designate of First Direct. In his unique position as former marketer and now CEO, Chris is going to give us some insight into what he's expecting from his marketers, how he's prepping to tackle the challenges ahead, and of course, whether marketing effectiveness will be on his first board agenda.
Well, I've cunningly transported myself through time and space to interview Chris Pitt. Thank you so much for joining us. In the course of the events today, we've been learning about the winners of the IPA Effectiveness Awards, their contributions to growth, discussing the contributions of advertising and marketing to helping the economy move forward. And I'm really struck by the fact that you're a CEO who has held the Chief Marketing Officer role, and that is relatively unusual. Can you tell me a bit about your move to take over your current position at First Direct first?
Yeah, sure, thanks. Well, I've been doing it about a week now, so clearly I've got it completely mastered. But my move really was a function of, I've been at HSBC a number of times. I've worked at Tesco Bank, I've worked outside of HSBC, but I've worked for it a number of times. And I think my move into FD is because FD is such a powerful brand, and it's been central, its kind of sense of difference in the financial services industry is so important. I think that's what appealed to the guys who employed me. But also relative to the kind of very nature of the conversation we're having is I'm a very commercially focused marketeer. I think it's very important that you understand your business to be able to market it. And I think I've been able to evidence that in my past career prior to applying for this role.
Excellent. And I should say for everyone watching, do start submitting your questions for this session because I'll be taking them in the next 8-9 minutes or so. So can you sum up what your attitude to investment in marketing?
Well, I think often us marketers, and I'm a very proud marketeer, I don't want to, on the basis I've been in a CEO for a week, is pretend that I'm not, is we sometimes don't talk the language of the business to the business. And in a company like HSBC, which is a very commercially focused as well as consumer focused business, talking marketing acronyms and marketing language to the business people sometimes doesn't cut the mustard. When I talk to the business people, I say that marketing does two things. It delivers on trade and trade in the moment, and trade tomorrow by building a very strong brand that people want to be engaged to through its values. I remember the first time I used that, it really drew, I got a sense in the room that it drew the people in that I was talking their language to then take them on a journey relative to marketing and why marketing is important, because we're a stand-up, legitimate part of the business. And sometimes we don't necessarily get treated like that.
Well, I think we were talking a few days ago, and you even talked about being fed up with marketing being a rounding error. That there's a sort of mismatch of expectation and understanding of what marketing does.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, again, in my career, I think at times I've been a kind of a victim of that, thinking that we're only getting kind of a trinket amount of money. And what it struck me as I've kind of got older and it got longer into my career is it's incumbent upon me to educate people who have influence over investment, to explain to them why marketing is so important. And I think one thing I've done this year, and we've just done it with my group CMO, is we've been in conversations with the group CFO of HSBC, as well as the CFO of the UK, to explain to them not only what the budget that we've got does, but also why they should give us more money as a function to drive the business forward and explain the value in a way that they understand. And that was a very successful conversation, and hope is going to set the bedrock for them thinking more positively about marketing as they're setting the budgets, rather than, as you say, we end up being a rounding error.
In a way, you've partly answered my next question, which is, commentators say marketers need to sell in their effectiveness much better to the C-suite. And I just wonder how they can get better. I don't know if you could give a little bit of an insight into, the example you just gave of, how you've tried to change that attitude.
Well, I think what I've done is picking up on that point of education. Is I've gone out and educated my UK CFO, not in a way that I've been kind of superior and kind of have a greater understanding, but is to basically explain how we measure what we do. So, like a lot of the people on this, I'm sort of listening to this call, is we use direct to sale measurement through digital. In financial services, aggregators is a big part of that, but also a pay-per-click advertising through Google and display advertising. So we know when we spend a pound, how we make a pound on that space. And then for our broadcast media, our brand driving media, we use econometrics to understand the value that creates. Now, when you speak to very literal, rational people, they can understand spending money on display advertising in Google or search advertising or aggregators, and they can see that when someone clicks and they buy. Explaining how econometrics works and how that can basically drive value requires a degree of investment. I think the other thing, Samira, is what we do is, I think it's very important that people who are marketing understand the construct of the profit and loss account of the business that they're operating within. And I get the CFO to come and do education sessions to my marketeers. To be honest, it's maybe unusual, but the marketers absolutely love it. And the CFOs, I don't think they get out very much, some of them. He absolutely loves coming out as well and talking to us.
Well, and again, this leads on to my next question. So do you think marketers speak the board's language well enough?
No, I absolutely don't. And I think even in my sort of tenure as a CEO, and I've been doing it along with my other job for a couple of weeks now, is, I'm looking at how I've got to invest in my business going forward. And I know there's so many pressures on me relative to delivering improved customer service, improving digital journeys, et al. And I think even over these last couple of weeks, it's exposed me to the fact that when I'm selling to a CEO as a CMO, I'm competing with so many other things for their investment. And I sometimes get lost in my own sense of value without thinking about how we need to basically articulate ourselves and compete, not in a kind of aggressive way, but in terms of actually this is a very sensible thing to do, investment level.
One question I want to sneak in before we go to all the questions from delegates is just a little bit earlier today, Fernando Machado at Burger King was talking about how it's so important that a creative idea makes him feel uncomfortable. And if it's not making him feel a bit uncomfortable, it's probably not good enough. Is that the same in your world? And if so, can you give an example or say why it's important? Sometimes it feels like there's a real tension between creatives doing slightly uncomfortable, edgy work and what businesses really think they need and want.
I absolutely agree with him. I couldn't agree with him more. The brief to the agency, J. Walter Thompson or Wunderman Thompson as they now are, when we started using Richard Ayoade as our face on our television advertising, and also our kind of We Are Not an Island creative work, which we've been running for a couple of years now, was to try and get me sacked. I wanted them to try and get me sacked by doing work which wasn't beige, which had a point of view, which was true of my business. My business is HSBC, 150-year-old, a very international and open and connected business, an open-minded business. It was very important that we did work which wasn't beige, especially in an industry like ours. It's dull. People don't wake up in the morning and leap out of bed and think about banking. So to actually cut through, you cannot be beige. And I think the values of our organisation is very important, and that's what we wanted to espouse with that work. So I absolutely agree. I couldn't agree more.
Excellent. Okay, I'm going to start taking questions that have come in. What business metrics and KPIs do you recommend marketers to use to speak to CFOs and CEOs? How do we pivot the conversation to use their language?
Well, I think return on investment is the key. We use within HSBC return on marketing investment, and that's because we are looking to get a greater understanding of the value of each consumer. But you really want to talk return on investment. That is what the business is talking to. And the longer, often you talk about that within revenue within a year, but the longer you can talk to a 5-year value, we talk to lifetime economic over a 5-year period in HSBC. But it was interesting, the conversation we had with the group CFO is we were talking ROMI, return on marketing investment, to him, and he wanted to talk about return on investment, and he actually challenged his finance guys to give us better understanding of the value that we were creating to deliver to a return on investment metric.
Okay. Our next question, where would you start when building a culture of marketing effectiveness?
I'd start with rationality. The reason I absolutely love marketing is because it's an emotive industry and a very rational industry. And you need to build it out of the facts, and being very rational about the impact that your advertising, your marketing, whatever it may be, has, is vitally important. We do pre-testing in all our broadcast advertising to understand its impact, so we're not reliant on our own view. And then we, as I say, we measure through click to sale, and then also we measure through econometrics. And I think we want to move to the value we create from the long-term nature of the consumer relationship as well. But you want to stand on very, very firm foundations, which is kind of proper data when you're having these conversations with the business.
Thank you. There's been a huge decline, it says the next question, in marketing effectiveness for financial services brands since the financial crash, largely as a result of a lurch towards short-term activation. In your opinion, what's the best way to rebuild long-term brand health?
It's a very good question. I was actually the head of a direct marketing function during the financial crisis, and I saw my return on marketing investment fall off a cliff, even as those days were going by. So that's a very good shout. I think the key thing is basically getting the metrics agreed within the business that you're going to deliver to. I think there is a short-termism. I don't think that COVID is going to kind of reverse that trend necessarily. But what you know is that we're a business here that's here for creating value for the long term, not just in the moment. And often we are challenged with our marketing budgets to deliver revenue within the year. And I know that's something I want to do at First Direct, which is tell the story of long-term value, because of the way financial services works is a current account is actually a cost to set up. And therefore you do need to consider it beyond the year in which it is opened. Otherwise it makes no sense from a short-term revenue perspective.
Thank you. I think we had another question that was very similar, so I'm going to go on to the one after. I'm interested to know whether you think it would be a priority to put your marketing chief on your board.
Absolutely. No, absolutely. And I think I would put my marketing, my CMO on my board, not only for doing the advertising, but for the insight. I think the work that we've done in the UK for HSBC, which has actually won quite a few awards, is absolutely a function of our strategy that we developed with Wunderman Thompson. The advertising kind of falls out of the strategy, and you want that CMO on your board, not just showing you the outward creative, but also talking to the purpose of the organisation through the strategy.
Thank you. Do you think your relationship with the CFO helped you to step up to the CEO role? Is that a factor other CMOs should think about if they want a more senior role?
I think so. It's when I rang up the person when I applied for this job, I did actually say to them, I think, and again, I'm often slightly self-deferential, is I think I might make you laugh when I asked him whether I could apply. And he instantaneously started talking to me about the job with great abandon. I was surprised, to be honest. And I think part of that is because he knows that his CFO has been talking the language of marketing as an important function, basically through for the conversations I've been having with him. So you create your own internal brand by being a more rounded business person, rather than just the person who necessarily brings the creative work or talks about something which is future thinking. Being cognizant of what matters to the business in the short term was communicated through the CFO to the guy who employed me, I think.
Do you believe that a smaller marketing spend might be riskier than a bigger one? Can you give some example of how you convinced the board to make a significantly bigger rather than a much smaller marketing investment?
Well, I think you do need to understand how the marketing budget works relative to the overall P&L. And then you really do need to understand the value that you create. So I went to the group CFO and said, for every £1 million you give me, this is what I turn it into for you. And I think that changes the very nature of the conversation, because on that basis, they're leaving money on the table. So the challenge that I laid down to the group CFO is, I could make you another X million pounds, and you're leaving it on the table by not giving me this small amount of money. So you reverse the whole conversation. And this is what I wanted to do with that, is often I felt as though I've got my backs to the wall and I'm trying to defend the budget I've got, rather than I was going on the offensive and basically putting within his mind the idea that he was leaving money on the table. And I think it doesn't really matter whether it's big or small necessarily. I think it matters whether you've got progression and you're showing you're on the front foot relative to what you can do.
How big a problem do you find the financial illiteracy of many marketers?
I think it's quite high, to be honest. And I don't want to play to the audience here, but I think some people love our industry because of some of the more creative, emotional parts of it. And I think they're valued. I've worked with my colleagues at HSBC who I can show creative work to, and they give me 2 comments and it completely opens my eyes to the value, so that they absolutely are valued within the organisation. But those people who can't talk the commerciality are then trapped, because they know what they can do for the company, but they can't articulate it. And it's the complete reverse, I think, of often my IT colleagues who really understand how the business functions, but because their communication skills are sometimes underdeveloped, they can't explain their value to the company. And I think that works the other way as well, with creative people not being able to explain, as you say, that person says, in terms of financial literacy, the value that they can create.
Right. Aren't CFOs emotional beings too? And shouldn't you appeal to their emotions as well?
Well, I think our power as marketing people is empathy. That is our superpower. So I completely agree. I wouldn't put CFOs in a kind of less emotive or more emotive box. It's understanding what matters to them and what matters to the business. In sometimes you want to talk growth, but in a crisis like this, you want to talk efficiency and effectiveness, I think. I'm by nature, I'm a very introverted person. And because I'm a marketeer, everybody thinks I'm out partying every night. I'm not. But you've got to understand your target audience, regardless of what functional area they're in, I think.
Sadly, we can't take more questions, Chris, but thank you so much for your time, especially taking over the role just so recently. So we'll all look forward to seeing what you do, and I will be looking out for the marketing mouse in your time ahead. So thank you again very much. Thank you for all your questions. And we now have Nina Schick next, talking about the age of synthetic media.